The next item on the agenda is the debate on the report titled Humanitarian Situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. You find it in document 15840, presented by Mr. Domagoj Djukovic on behalf of the Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons Committee. In order to finish by 7:10 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 6:25 to allow time for reply and vote. I call Mr. Hadjukovic, rapporteur. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes for your reply at the end of the debate. Mr. Hadjukovic.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, at the beginning, allow me to express my utmost sadness and regret at all the human tragedies that have unraveled during the 30 years long conflict in the region. Being a displaced person myself at a certain point in my life, I assure you I can empathize with anyone on both sides faced with such a fate. The series of human tragedies in this part of the world has just gotten a new episode, an exodus of Armenian population from Nagorno-Karabakh. Our assembly cannot be silent in the face of such a development. Report before you, dear colleagues, this afternoon deals with this humanitarian issue. Before going to the content of the resolution, recommendation, and indeed report, allow me a few words about the terminology used. The complexities of the region are maybe most notably reflected in the names and toponyms of the area, Karabakh or Nagorno-Karabakh. I understand the importance and emotional appeal attached to those, while Armenians in the region tie their ethnic identity to the name Nagorno-Karabakh.
One second, could I have order in the hall? Mr. Rapporteur, please continue.
Thank you. While Armenians in the region tie their ethnic identity to the name Nagorno-Karabakh, the Azerbaijani call a broader region than that Karabakh. I wish to clarify one thing, why I used and chose to have a report with this name. So first, Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights referred this suggestion for an urgent debate. Then the Presidential Committee referred it to Bureau, then Bureau referred it to the Committee on Migration under the name Humanitarian Situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is the mandate I got, the name under which I got this mandate, and I felt obliged to follow it. Nevertheless, in the explanatory memorandum, I chose to use both names, Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, and other toponyms, reflecting Azerbaijani's territorial sovereignty over the region and the rights of the Armenians living in this territory. That being said, Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh is a part of Azerbaijan. The territorial integrity of Azerbaijan is not challenged by any of the colleagues here as far as I know. Nevertheless, the sovereignty of a territory also entails responsibilities for actions taken on it and protection of people living in it. It was sad to see mass exodus of Armenian population fueled by mistrust and fear accumulated over 30 years of conflict and 10 months of humanitarian crisis. The latter we debated, I believe, in the last sitting of our chamber. If we wish to achieve a lasting peace and stability in the region, a dialogue and peaceful resolution are without an alternative. As mentioned above, with sovereignty over territory came responsibility as well. Azerbaijan must undertake unequivocal, genuine, and immediate action demonstrating its willingness to ensure safe return and protection of rights of Armenian population wishing to return. Armenians from this area are Azerbaijani citizens, and as such should enjoy protection and the rights as any citizens of Azerbaijan. I believe it is in the interest of Azerbaijan, as well as Armenia, population of the region, and the region of a whole, if we talk about Caucasus region, that this is settled as soon as possible with a peaceful outcome. This will require a dedicated, sincere, and productive attitude and approach on all sides, but especially Azerbaijan, because we are debating situation on Azerbaijani territory today. I do understand that this will be a long and not easy process. But at least we can hope that this report will be a first step on that way. Finally, allow me to note on the data I used in the preparation of the report. Long-standing inability for international organizations to have access to the region, including our organization, has made it hard to corroborate certain pieces of information, since both sides must usually give conflicting claims. I have been very careful to include only data that can be confirmed by independent international sources. Hopefully, after UN and other international institutions will be able to have full access to the region and monitor the situation, including our rapporteurs and representatives of this institution, we will have a more comprehensive data on our hands. We have just debated, dear colleagues, restoration of credibility of international institutions and our role in this credibility. Credibility of our institutions must be reinforced with readiness to stand up for any human rights violations, with readiness not to be silent in the face of mass exodus, and with the readiness to actively uphold our values and indeed humanity. Therefore, I call on you to support this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapporteur, dear Mr. Ajdukovic. You will have the possibility to respond at the end of the debate. First in the debate, I now call, on behalf of the speakers of the political groups, Mr. Christopher Shope from the United Kingdom. Christopher speaks on behalf of the European Conservative Democratic Alliance. You have 3 minutes, Chris.
Mr. President, this is a really important debate, and displaced people, it always leads to a tragic situation. And we're talking here about 100,000 being displaced in Nagorno-Karabakh. And just in the last week, 150,000 people or more have been displaced in Gaza. And we know that over the last 2 or 3 years, perhaps 300,000 people have been forced to leave the Russian Federation and have gone to Armenia. And the fact that this is happening all over the world doesn't make it any more acceptable. And I speak in this debate as a member of a political group which is proud to have both Armenians and Azeris among its number. Indeed, at one time, as you will know, Mr. President, when I was the chairman of that group, we had both the Armenian and Azeri delegation leaders in our group. And we were all reminded of the rich and complex political history of the South Caucasus in the well-attended joint meeting of all 3 committees involved this morning. But let's not forget that behind all this is the Russian Federation, because as puppet master in this conflict, the so-called Minsk process enabled Russia to divide and rule and prevent a peaceful outcome for far too long. And then in November 2020, Russia agreed to provide 1,960 troops as peacekeepers. Yet that counted for nothing when on the 19th of September, they stood aside to allow the Azeris to enter into that territory. Is it any wonder, therefore, that we have got a crisis like this when the Russian sympathizers in this assembly continue to create division and to cause division and take advantage of that? Can I just say that looking at 2 of the paragraphs of this report, paragraphs 13 and 14, which are commonsensical, but amendments 28 and 29 were put forward in order to ensure that those common sense propositions apply to both the Azeris and the Armenians. Surely that makes sense. And I find it disappointing that in too many places, this draft resolution doesn't refer just to the current humanitarian situation, but it allows itself to become contentious, divisive, and at times provocative, using a language which refers to the background to the current situation in a divisive manner. And unsurprisingly, that has led to retaliatory amendments being tabled, and I don't know how many of those will be divided on later. But I think that what this shows is that this Assembly should be uniting together and supporting both Armenia and Azerbaijan in resolving this conflict. And it should remind itself that a lot of this has been facilitated and the conflict has been continued as a result of the manipulation by the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Chris. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Paul Gavin from Ireland. Paul speaks on behalf of the Unified European Left.
President, on behalf of the United European Left, I want to congratulate the rapporteur and call for full support for this report. On the 16th of June last, I spoke in this chamber when reporting on ensuring safe and free access through the Lachin corridor. And I said at that time that I had to come to the conclusion that the aim of the Azerbaijan regime was to drive the people of Nagorno-Karabakh out of the region. And it gives me no pleasure to say that subsequent events have proven that to be the case. This is a very good report. It's clear in its strong condemnation of Azerbaijan for its wholly unwarranted military attacks on the besieged Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh. The rapporteur correctly highlights the preceding 10-month blockade of the Lachin corridor, the only route connecting the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia, which brought incredible hardships to the people of the region. It was telling that the Azerbaijani regime consistently denied that any such blockade ever took place, whilst at the same time denying this organization, including myself, access to the corridor, and of course they denied every other human rights organization access as well. Assurances from the Azerbaijan delegates that their government had nothing to do with the sudden decision of over 100,000 men, women and children to suddenly leave their ancestral homeland, and assurances that the Armenian population would have their human rights respected under this regime have to be put in context. This is a regime that consistently tells these people that there's no such place as Nagorno-Karabakh. This is a regime that has been condemned by numerous human rights bodies for how it treats its own population. According to Amnesty International, freedom of expression, assembly and association remain severely restricted as authorities carry out arbitrary arrests, politically motivated persecutions, and crush peaceful protests. According to Human Rights Watch, the regime implements systemic torture and ill treatment of prisoners. Colleagues, if this is how Aliyev treats his own people, what do you think he is likely to do with the Armenian population? And I want to put on record my disgust at the brazen cynicism of the representatives of this regime in this chamber. This is extreme right-wing politics in action, the very kind that Mr. Sayedov warned us about earlier this week. Armenians have been living in the region for thousands of years. The very first Armenian church in recorded history is the Amras Monastery in Nagorno-Karabakh, which goes back to the 4th century. This is their home, and now we've witnessed 100,000 human beings being forced to leave this home. We need to call this out for what it is: ethnic cleansing. But colleagues, we have to do more than this. All week, people have been speaking to me to ask me when this assembly will take meaningful action against the Azerbaijani regime. Apparently, even the ethnic cleansing of 100,000 people may bring no consequences. The United European Group finds this entirely unacceptable. To conclude, if Europe continues to turn a blind eye to the horrific actions against the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh, if member states and the Committee of Ministers continue to choose silence and inaction, they are giving a green light for copycat actions throughout Europe. If this assembly is to retain credibility, we must finally hold the Aliyev regime to account.
Thank you very much, Paul. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Frank Schwabe from Germany, and Frank speaks on behalf of the group of Socialists, Democrats and Greens. The floor is yours.
Dear President, dear colleagues, this assembly is giving today a very clear message. No country should cross red lines in this organization, and Azerbaijan is not just 1 centimeter before. These red lines, Azerbaijan is just standing on the red line. And one step more towards the core territory of Armenia would mean that Azerbaijan cross this red line. This pace is fed up. This is my impression. with the behavior of some member countries, and we will not take it anymore. We will use our instruments, all existing instruments. This is a message from this debate and from the whole week. And for sure, due to international law, and nobody here, maybe just a few, say this is not right, Nagorno-Karabakh, Karabakh, however you call it, it's a part of Azerbaijan. And maybe we didn't make it clear enough towards Armenia as well and Azerbaijan that we expect really to reach a result through negotiations. But acts of war are never acceptable for this organization. And if you call it ethnic cleansing or house forever, this way to close the Lachin corridor and not to the Lachin corridor, to give the people the impression they have no future with the war attack, makes people leaving their home and the territory where they lived. So we have expectations on this, on Azerbaijan, to really give the population to be the possibility to have connection to their own houses, to their own properties, to secure the cultural heritage, the religious buildings and symbols in the region. But what we are doing and what we are expecting and what we are proposing today is very clear. We asked the Committee of Ministers and the Secretary General, we urge them to do more and to use all the possibilities they have. And we are prepared to challenge the credentials of the Azeri delegation as soon as possible, not for everything, but for the question, and this is their responsibility, to give us access to the region. Paul Gavin, who spoke before, could not go to where he wanted to go, and the co-rapporteurs could not go and visit political prisoners in June, as I understand it. So we are prepared to challenge the credentials as soon as possible, and we are prepared to use the most important thing what we can do to start a joint complementary procedure. And at the very end, it's very clear. The country agrees and acts in line with our organization, or the country has to leave this organization.
Thank you very much, dear Frank. Now we are going to listen to Madam Boriana Ahlberg from Sweden, and Boriana speaks on behalf of the European People's Party. The floor is yours.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, imagine that you and your family are forced to flee your country in a rush, barely managing to pack a few belongings into a plastic bag before leaving your home behind. Because you hear the echoes of artillery and see the drones with deadly loads. Because you fear. Because you recall the haunting memories of soldiers taking lives and torturing innocent civilians during the autumn of 2020. Consider the agony of hunger, the desperation of not having essential medicines for your elderly parents, and the ongoing challenge of feeding your children, all because the only road connecting you to the outside world has been blocked for 10 months back. The Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh don't need to imagine. This tragedy is their reality. What did they do to deserve such a fate? Their sin dates back to 1921, when Stalin's Bolsheviks played games with the people and borders of the Caucasus. In the aftermath of the Soviet Union collapse, a lot of miscalculations were done about Nagorno-Karabakh, which led to 2 bloody wars in which human rights violations and atrocities were committed by both warring sides. However, it's crucial to note that during the 3 past decades, Nagorno-Karabakh has consistently moved towards pluralistic democracy, with free elections, independent judiciary system, and ombudsman function. A democracy in strong contrast to Azerbaijan, which has been under the control of the President family Aliyev since 1993. The report we are debating today expresses hope about a future for the Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians in their ancestral homeland. But how realistic is this hope? Has Azerbaijan demonstrated a commitment to fulfilling its international obligations, statements, or decisions of the International Court of Justice? Can a member state force an ethnic minority to starve under blockade and still remain a member of the Council of Europe? Can a member state deny basic rights like freedom of movement to its citizens and still remain a member of the Council of Europe? Can a member state engage in ethnic cleansing and still continue to be a member of the Council of Europe? And what is required to initiate a complementary joint procedure between the Parliamentary Assembly and the Committee of Ministers? If Azerbaijan fails to secure the rights of Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians to return to their homes and live in peace, it will be a failure for our assembly too.
Thank you very much, Boriana. Last speaker on behalf of the political groups will be Mr. Julian Bulai from Romania on behalf of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe. Julian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear all, we are facing a severe humanitarian crisis. We do not have time to lose. We must address this crisis urgently and now. Dear Ambassador of Azerbaijan, Mr. Fakhraddin Ismailov, on behalf of ALDE, I ask you to deliver the following message to your government. The ALDE group will support actions to deliver these messages to the Azerbaijani government. Any hostilities, including rhetoric, must be stopped. Any border violation would be unacceptable for a member state of Council of Europe. All Council of Europe missions should be on the ground and receive full cooperation at all levels. The issue of mass exodus must be urgently addressed, and we need a clear roadmap on how it will be dealt with. All the Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians should receive full guarantees of return to Nagorno-Karabakh. If all this is not to be echoed, we are willing to use all the tools available to us in order to trigger concrete repercussions. We all stand, and ALDE stands for full cooperation with the Committee of Ministers in order to achieve all these elements that have been mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm calling the next speaker, Mr. Rubinyan, Armenia, who represents EPP Group.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, I want to first thank the rapporteur for the job he did. It was a challenging job, and he did a good job. Regarding the situation, back in 2001, when Azerbaijan became a member of this organization, it undertook an obligation to solve the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict peacefully, not to use force. In 2020, it waged war against Nagorno-Karabakh. Our Azerbaijani colleagues confessed this openly, that they decided to use force, and they are proud of it. That's a breach of their statutory obligations. Fast forward 3 years, last month, they attacked Nagorno-Karabakh again. Again, they called this anti-terrorist operation, and we all know that they consider all Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh terrorists. And again, they're saying it proudly that they decided to use force. Again, a breach of their statutory obligations. This all, the latest attacks, happened after 9 months of a blockade. And the intent of this blockade was always obvious. First, to starve these people, to make them freeze, then to attack and open the corridor in one direction. A couple of months ago, the president of Azerbaijan even said it publicly, that the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh have either to accept the Azerbaijani governance or they may leave. The corridor is open. And that is exactly what happened. But the most cynical and disheartening part of this is the open trolling by our Azerbaijani colleagues, including in this hemicycle. You remember, for 9 months they were saying, what blockade? There is no blockade. The road is open. The rapporteur would visit Armenia, go to the place where the Lachin corridor starts. He would see that the corridor is completely blocked. They would say, no, it's open. Then they would amass forces next to Nagorno-Karabakh on the line of contact. Everyone would see that. Everyone would say Azerbaijan is preparing for an attack. They would say, no, we have no intention to attack. And they did attack. Dear colleagues, some of you who were present today at the joint hearing of some committees may have heard that one of our Azerbaijani colleagues here called Armenia Western Azerbaijan. This is an illustration of what Azerbaijan has become. It has become a danger, a threat to international security architecture, to international law. And Azerbaijan must be stopped. I'm glad that after years of us talking, many of you have understood that Azerbaijan has aggressive intentions, had aggressive intentions towards Nagorno-Karabakh, and you all saw how it ended. Now we have to send a clear signal to Azerbaijan. Clear signal, clear actions are needed to show Azerbaijan that they cannot continue their aggressive policies. Thank you.
And now I call to take the floor Mr. Samad Saidov, Azerbaijan, European Conservatives Group.
Madam President, thank you very much. I quite clearly understand how difficult for rapporteur to prepare this report under this unbelievable pressure, which we can see. Unfortunately, this is exactly what we have discussed at the previous topic. 30 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, 1 million of Azerbaijanis became a subject of ethnic cleansing, and 20% of my territory had been occupied. They had only two choices, these poor people: to run away, to become refugees or IDPs, or to die. Those who has decided to leave, they became refugees and still living in the refugees camp, because that's very difficult to return back because of the millions of mines in the Karabakh region. But those who have decided to stay, they had brutally killed, as in Khojaly, where within overnight, more than 700 kids, women, older people murdered. Yes, with this pain, with these problems, with this tragedy, we came to the Council of Europe, and we undertaken this obligation to find the peaceful resolution of this conflict, but not alone. Together with Armenia, and 20 years we asked Armenia, asked this assembly to find peaceful resolution of this conflict. What they did, they occupied more. They said, no, we're never ready to return these territories back. And maybe, my dear colleagues, you have heard any regrets about 1 million refugees which they created. Maybe you have heard any regrets about hundreds of killing kids, women, and older people. No, never. And 100, unfortunately, Armenians from Karabakh left the Karabakh. And as the leader of Azerbaijani delegation, I say, we do regret that they left. But they poisoned for 30 years by this propaganda that we are not able to live together. Yes, we can. We can. And that's why we are here. But approach which we can see from you, accusation of so-called ethnic cleansing, when we gave everything, we opened our doors, we created registration files, We invited Armenians back. And this is not my words, this is word from the Commissioner from United Nations. We have been waiting institutions from Council of Europe in Azerbaijan. We are doing our best in order to restore justice, human rights and democracy. And we are under fire, and again under fire because of backsliding of democracy here in this assembly. Please return back to your values. Please understand that Azerbaijan has done a great job in order to restore territorial integrity, which you are dreaming for in Moldova, in Ukraine, in Georgia, and I am proud of that.
Thank you, Mr. Saidov. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Torarinsson from Iceland, represents EPP Group.
Madam President, nearly the entire ethnic Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh have been forced to flee their homes, finding refuge in Armenia. The UN mission, lacking neutrality with Turkey, Russia, and Pakistan on board, came too late. People are confused and don't know what will happen to their homes. Many are traumatized, children and elderly. Azerbaijan has failed to ensure the safe and dignified exodus of the people. The right to have a safe return of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh should be ensured. But we all know, for obvious reasons, that the people of Nagorno-Karabakh do not trust the government of Azerbaijan, the same Azerbaijan government that isolated them from the world for 9 months and refuses to allow the Council of Europe to enter the Lachin corridor. Madam President, the right for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to return should be guaranteed within the comprehensive framework of settling the relationship between Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan. A safe movement along the Lachin corridor in both directions should be restored. International presence with a large mandate to exercise administrative governance and mediation functions can be an option to consider for any trust-building process. A UN-mandated international administrative mechanism should be deployed in Karabakh to ensure a smooth transitional process with emphasis on physical security, safety, and dignity of people. The deployment of international police or any other civil force should also be considered. The cultural heritage monuments and sites with religious, natural, and historical significance left in Nagorno-Karabakh are under direct threat and should be kept under constant international supervision. Madam President, during the 2020 war, I visited Nagorno-Karabakh. I saw with my own eyes the destruction done by Azerbaijan. Family housing, schools, churches, and the hospital, everything was bombed. I spoke to traumatized people seeking shelter in the basement of bombed Susi Cathedral. I will never forget this. I have also been to Azerbaijan and visited graveyards of hundreds of young men killed in the war. I hope and pray that this will never happen again. Madam President, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh deserve to live in dignity. We will all be watching Azerbaijan. Closing, I would like to express my condolences to the families of Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan that lost their loved ones in the conflict that has lasted more than 35 years.
Thank you, Mr. Torarinsson. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Babakan. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, esteemed ladies and gentlemen. Towards the close of the 20th century, the world bore witness to mass killings in the presence of the international community, driven by ethnic amnesty. Over the past 30 years, numerous meetings were held between the parties through Minsk process. The foundation for these negotiations rested upon the Madrid principles, which encompassed the settlement of the conflict within the framework of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And this position was subsequently reaffirmed by Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in his address to the Armenian Parliament earlier this year, acknowledging that the Madrid principles recognize Karabakh as part of Azerbaijani territory. After the Second Karabakh War, for the 3 years following the trilateral statements signing, Armenia maintained a large military force equipped with heavy weaponry within Azerbaijan's borders, including the misuse of the Lashin Road. Azerbaijan then established a border checkpoint on its territory at the Lashin route, aiming to prevent the transport of weapons and ammunition and safeguard regional security. Simultaneously, allegations and campaigns against Azerbaijan began in various circles, accusing the Azerbaijani government of creating a humanitarian crisis in the region. To reiterate that a border checkpoint was established on the Lashin Road, connecting Armenia to Karabakh, and this road remained open for humanitarian purposes. Parallelly, it was proposed to utilize the Agdam Road for humanitarian purposes as well. Following active diplomatic efforts by several international actors, the International Committee of Red Cross started a simultaneous delivery of humanitarian goods through Agdam and Lashin. In addition, subsequent to trilateral agreement in November 2020, Azerbaijani armed force launched the operations with the aim of neutralizing military targets and safeguarding civilians against attacks by illegal armed groups in the region. These operations did not result in harm to civilian populations. Such reports of attacks on civilian population in recent days have been contradicted by Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan himself. And most recently, Armenian representative of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Belani, stated that no cases of ill treatment by Azerbaijanis were reported during the recent period. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Babakan. And now I'm calling the last speaker in this debate, Mr. Omtzigt, Netherlands EPP Group. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Can we look what's going on here? More than 100,000 people have been driven from their homes. A complete ethnic minority in Azerbaijan is no longer living in Nagorno-Karabakh. This was exactly what we wanted to prevent when both Armenia and Azerbaijan were admitted to the Council of Europe. They promised to use only peaceful means, and now the whole minority was forced to leave. And let's not make a mistake. This way they will not return. And this, we treat it today as if this were a crisis between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's not. It's a crisis of this particular organization. We did not do anything when Russia occupied Crimea. We now fail to take decisive action when a complete area is ethnically cleansed. If we are a rules-based organization, and if you flout international law in this particular way, then this is a signal to every conflict in Europe that you can solve it by military means. This sends a signal to the conflict between Serbia and Kosovo. And the stronger party can say, let's try to get a little piece of land. The very essence of this organization was to actually solve conflicts with peaceful means. And we seem to end that without any consequences, thereby rendering this organization less useful than it should be. And the signals were there. Mr. Ocampo warned months ago for a genocide and ethnic cleansing, former prosecutor of the ICJ. There is an ICC. There is an ICJ judgment, injunctions that the Lachin corridor should be free to actually provide food. It just didn't happen. So I really urge you, if we let this happen, then what is the red line? Do we have any red lines left. My answer would be, we are talking, but if we never act, then we'll in the end lose this institution as a useful way to defend human rights when they're threatened at a large scale by driving out 100,000 people of their homeland. Thank you.
Sorry, but this is a good starter. I now have to interrupt the list of speakers, but time does not allow us more. Thank you very much, colleague. Speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but did not have been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that typewritten text must be submitted electronically no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers has been interrupted. I now call on Mr. Hadjikovic, the rapporteur, to reply, and you have 3 minutes, Mr. Rapporteur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, as it was mentioned in the discussion we just had, this part of the world has an enormous amount of suffering, enormous amount of scars. And I visited both countries. I've seen displaced person camps, and I cannot be indifferent to that amount of suffering on both sides. 30 years of conflict tend to generate such deep, deep scars. However, dear colleagues, we are not debating history today, especially the last 30 years which have been turbulent in the region. We are debating the current situation and the plight that the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh is facing. And again, I cannot be indifferent to their plight as well, since I well know what it means to be displaced person. I know that the reconciliation and reintegration process will be a long and hard one, but the first step needs to be taken. And I do hope that this report will only help and solidify Azerbaijan as well as Armenia to be constructive in this process, to be sincere, to be open, to really want this reintegration to happen. Because without sincerity on both sides and willingness to do it, a sincere and candid willingness, unfortunately this process cannot succeed. Furthermore, we have debated again the role of our organization in strengthening the role of international organization in peacekeeping and prevention of war. Unfortunately, we haven't prevented it in this sense, but what we can do is clearly state that anybody who violates our values and indeed our charters will suffer the consequences. I'm not saying that any country will in this case. If there is a willingness, if there is dedication to the cause, I'm sure that our rapporteurs will be, and I hope actually that our rapporteurs will be telling us a different story, that they'll be telling us that the reconciliation process has begun. It will be long, it will be, as I said, painful sometimes, it will be difficult, but it must happen. It's in the interest of Azerbaijan, it's in the interest of Armenia, of the broader region, of Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. And I can tell you from the perspective of my own country, Croatia, that has a similar experience. Or we can look at the Franco-German rapprochement after the Second World War. So these are success stories. This can happen. But again, willingness must exist. Therefore, colleagues, once again, I call on you to accept and support this report. This is not aimed at anybody. This is aimed at helping everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapporteur. Does the chair of the Committee of Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons wish to speak? That's the case. Mr. Rosopoulos, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I want to thank Domagoj Hadjikovic for his excellent report and the Secretariat for its support. Today, our Assembly has the opportunity to stand for the values it defends. I hope that thanks to your vote, we will be able to show that we do not let tragic events go, but that we are ready to take our responsibilities to reverse the course of things. Our compass are the Member States' statutory and international human rights obligations. Over the last 2 weeks, we have witnessed more than 100,600 Armenians fleeing Nagorno-Karabakh, which represents nearly 99% of the population of this area. This exodus was the culmination of a 10-month humanitarian crisis linked to the blockades of the Lanchin corridor and the military operation launched by Azerbaijan on 19 September 2023. While we see again two narratives opposing each other, two elements cannot be questioned. First, that Azerbaijan has the responsibility and the obligation to protect the rights and freedoms of all the inhabitants in this region. And second, that it must do everything in its power to reassure the Armenian population that their rights and safety will be fully respected and effectively so, including their rights as a minority group. The decision for an urgent debate to take place was triggered by the tragic events that have unfolded since 19 September 2023, forcing almost an entire population to leave its ancestral homeland and inviting suspicions of many aspects of ethnic cleansing. This is why this report calls on Azerbaijan to undertake unequivocal, genuine, and immediate actions demonstrating its willingness to ensure safe and dignified return of the Armenian population, wishing to do so and to protect their rights. In these extremely tense times, immediate actions are needed to prevent any further escalation of this human tragedy. As the world is watching, faces of men, women, and children petrified on the route of exile, our committee believes that the use of reassuring and nuanced language, as well as providing speedy access to the region to international organizations, including the Council of Europe, would be a first step. The report also looks at the dire humanitarian situation stemming from the forcible displacement of the Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians and highlights the need to support Armenia, including through Council of Europe action in its efforts to cope with a large number of refugees. Dear colleagues, for all these reasons, and the reasons that have already been said by Domagoj Hadžikovič, I encourage you to wholeheartedly support the draft resolution and the draft recommendation as it currently stands. Once again, I want to congratulate the rapporteur for his hard work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson of the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons. The debate is closed. The Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons has presented a draft resolution to which 29 amendments have been tabled and a draft recommendation to which 9 amendments have been tabled. We will start with consideration of the draft resolution and then move on to consideration of the draft recommendation. I understand that the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 11, 10 and 12 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved by the Committee, should be declared as agreed by the Assembly. Is that so, Mr. Rousseau-Boulos?
Yes, Mr. President.
Does anybody object? Don't see. As there is no objection, I declare that the amendments 11, 10 and 12 to the draft resolution have been agreed. I understand that the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons also wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 19, 5, 20, 36, 25, 26, 8, 27, 28, 29, 37, 38, 30, 14, and 18 to the draft resolution, which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared as rejected. Is that so, Mr. Rousseau-Boulos?
Yes, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? I don't see any. As nobody objects, amendments 19, 5, 20, 36, 25, 26, 8, 27, 28, 29, 37, 38, 30, 14 and 18 to the draft resolution are rejected. I now call Mr. Ruben Rubinian to support Amendment 6. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. The purpose of this amendment is to reference the interim measures decided by the European Court of Human Rights, and we think this enriches the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubinian. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Samad Saidov, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, with European Court of Human Rights, we have communication and we are in close contact. The process is going on, and that's why, from our point of view, this is not so relevant to put this amendment into the text. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saidov. What is the opinion of the committee?
Mr. President, the committee is in favor of this amendment.
Thank you very much. I now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. May I ask the results to be displayed? The amendment is carried. I now call Mr. Saidov to support Amendment 21. You have 30 seconds. And I have been informed that Mr. Hadjukovic wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment to the Amendment 21 as follows.
Thank you, Mr. President.
But first we do the amendment. Yes, you're correct, Samad. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, the majority of the members of the Assembly just talked about the facts, and this is a fact. The situation escalated following the killings of Azerbaijani civilians and law enforcement personnel in the mine explosion and ... Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saidov. I have been informed that Mr. Hadjukovic wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment to Amendment 21 as follows. In the amendment, replace the words, the situation escalated following, with the following words, a contributing factor to the escalation of the situation was. So the amendment would read as follows. A contributing factor to the escalation of the situation was the killing of Azerbaijani civilians and law enforcement personnel in a mine explosion. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, do 10 or more members object to the oral sub-amendment being debated? I don't see. Therefore, where is it? As there are not less than 10 members to object to oral sub-amendment being debated, I call therefore Mr. Hadjukovic to support his oral sub-amendment. You have 30 seconds.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, this indeed is a fact, so I propose we keep it a bit different wording, though, because of the linguistical reasons, but it did contribute, so it did happen, so I don't see any harm including it in the report.
Does anybody wish, thank you very much, Mr. Hadjukovic, does anyone wish to speak against the oral sub-amendment? Mr. Rubinian?
Thank you. I'm against this amendment because this is a justification of an ethnic cleansing, dear colleagues. The situation escalated because the leadership of Azerbaijan had decided to use force and to attack Nagorno-Karabakh and to ethnically cleanse its population. What does what do mines have to do with this? Are we really going to try to find justifications for their attack? This is completely unacceptable, and I urge everyone to vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Rubinho. What's the opinion of the mover of the main amendment, Mr. Seidov?
Mr. President, we are in favor of sub-amendment, oral amendment which presented by rapporteur.
Thank you very much. I now will put the oral sub-amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The oral sub-amendment is adopted. We now will consider the main amendment as sub-amended. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment as sub-amended? No. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment as sub-amended?
The committee is in favor, Mr. President.
I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. Was it correct that it was accepted? Yeah. Okay. I forgot to look. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And the amendment as sub-amended has been adopted. I now call Mr. Samad Seidov to support Amendment 22. You have 30 seconds, Samad. Sorry, the other mover.
Mr. President, thank you. Yes, we propose after paragraph 7, insert the following paragraph. The Assembly notes the assurances given by the Republic of Azerbaijan that the rights and freedoms of Armenian residents will be ensured in line with its constitution and applicable international obligations, including those mentioned above. The Assembly notes the plans of the government of Azerbaijan with respect to the reintegration of Armenian residents and ensuring their rights, including in such areas as security, socio-economic development, and religious, cultural, and linguistic rights. We believe that it's important to reflect on the efforts done by Azerbaijani side, so we propose the following amendment.
Thank you, Madam, and sorry, my eyes are not always good enough to see. Some of you are, I can identify blindly, but thank you very much, Madam. I have been informed that Mr. Hajdukowicz wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment to Amendment 22 as follows. Replace the words assurances with the word promises and insert the word the announcement of before the words the plans. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, if 10 or more members object to the oral sub-amendment being debated, I do not see, as it has not been objected to be debated. I call Mr. Hajdukowicz to support his oral sub-amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just allow me to correct one mistake. I forgot to thank the Secretariat for all their support in this work, and it would be impossible to do it without them. As suggested, this sub-amendment actually only deals with the linguistical issues, so I hope it is acceptable to the mover.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hajdukowicz. Does anybody wish to speak against the oral sub-amendment? I don't see. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment, Madam?
We are in favor.
In favor. I shall now put the oral sub-amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Can we see the results to be displayed? And the oral sub-amendment is adopted. We will now consider the main amendment as sub-amended. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment as sub-amended? Do not see any. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment?
Our committee is in favor.
In favor. I shall now put Amendment 22 as sub-amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Can we see the results, please? The amendment is adopted. I now call Mr. Sadov to support Amendment 23. You have 30 seconds. Again, Madam, you have the floor.
It's me again, Mr. President. Well, in this amendment, we propose to insert the following paragraph. The Assembly welcomes the invitation by Azerbaijan to the United Nations to visit the region and notes the preliminary conclusion of the United Nations mission that took place on 1st October. It also welcomes the planned visit by the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights to Azerbaijan, including its Karabakh region, and the cooperation of the Azerbaijani authorities to facilitate this visit. Just to inform you that UN mission have already been to Karabakh region, and we are open to collaboration because, so this is the reason we would like to insert this amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam. I have been informed that Mr. Hadjukovic wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment to the Amendment 23 as follows. Replace the words Karabakh region with the words Nagorno-Karabakh region and add the following sentence at the end of the amendment. The Assembly expects that this invitation will be extended to its members as well. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, do 10 or more members object to the oral sub-amendment being debated? I do not see. As there has not been an objection raised to that we do debate the oral sub-amendment, I call Mr. Hadjukovic to support his oral sub-amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. It's only a correction with the narrative and the overall linguistics of the report, so to keep it in line, and to mention Nagorno-Karabakh since it is more specific than the Karabakh region, so Karabakh region is much broader. Sorry. And also, I believe it is also good to mention that we hope that our members, rapporteurs, will also be able to visit the area as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Does anybody wish to speak against the oral sub-amendment? That is not the case. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment, Mr. Sadov?
Mr. President, in order to be cooperative, we are not against.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadov. I will now put the amendment, the oral sub-amendment to the vote. Vote is open. The vote is closed. Can we see the results? The oral sub-amendment is carried. We now will consider the main amendment as sub-amended. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment as sub-amended? Mr. Rubinia.
Dear colleagues, I want to remind you all that for years and months, Azerbaijan was refusing to let the representatives of international organizations to Nagorno-Karabakh. And only after they ethnically cleansed the whole population, they let the UN mission go there. In this light, the words, the Assembly welcomes the invitation by Azerbaijan, or the Assembly welcomes the planned visit, sound like a mockery to the people who have been displaced. I'm strongly against this amendment, and I urge everyone to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubinia. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment as sub-amended, Mr. Rousopoulos?
The committee is in favor, Mr. President.
I shall now put the amendment 23 as sub-amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Can I see the results to be displayed? And the amendment as amended is carried. We will now come to amendment number 7. In the name of Mr. Ruben Rubinian, I have been informed that Mr. Hadjukovic wishes to propose an oral amendment as an alternative to Amendment 7. This oral amendment can only be taken if amendment number 7 is withdrawn. Mr. Rubinian, do you wish to withdraw amendment number 7?
Mr. President, just to clarify, what happens if I don't wish to withdraw?
Then we consider amendment 7.
No, but maybe the chair of the committee would clarify, because we voted on an amendment. So which amendment is considered adopted in the committee?
To clarify, we can only go to discuss amendment, an oral amendment, if amendment 7 is withdrawn. If it is not withdrawn, we deal with amendment 7. So once again to you, Mr. Rubinian, do you want to withdraw the amendment 7 so that the oral amendment can be debated?
Sorry, but we voted on this amendment in the committee. We adopted it as sub-amended.
No, but the question, you are the one who decides. If you want to keep the amendment, we are not going to discuss the oral amendment.
I will keep the amendment then.
You keep the amendment, yes. Okay. That means that the oral amendment cannot be taken. Mr. Rubinian, we have 30 seconds to speak on amendment number 7.
Thank you. We propose to replace the word fear with the following words: threat of physical extinction, a long-standing policy of hatred in Azerbaijan towards Armenians. Why? Because these people didn't just leave because they simply feared. They felt genuine threat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubinian. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? Madam?
Yes, Mr. President, we are against this amendment because this is purely allegation. Fear is a subjective feeling. Threat needs to be proved. There is not a single proof, and UN mission also came and said that there was no cases of maltreatment, and in most cases we had evidences that when these people reach Yerevan, they've been asked and they said that there was no cases of violation of our rights or violence or something. So we are against that.
Thank you, Madam. What's your opinion of the committee?
The committee is in favor of this amendment.
The committee is in favor of the amendment. I now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The amendment is carried. For this amendment, 2 sub-oral amendments will be considered. Oral sub-amendments will be considered. I call Mr. Sadov to support Amendment 24. You have 30 seconds summoned.
Mr. President, Amendment 24, in the draft resolution, paragraph 9, after the first sentence, add the following sentence. The Assembly also notes that the relevant independent bodies present on the ground, such as the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, have not recorded incidents of mistreatment by Azerbaijani authorities of Armenians living for Armenia. We believe that this is a very important message and it should be in the report.
Thank you very much. And this was clearly not Mr. Sadov speaking, but Madam Apadarai. Sorry for the misunderstanding. I have been informed that the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment number 1 to Amendment 24. In Amendment 24, after the word, also inserts the words according to the available information. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, do 10 or more members object to the oral sub-amendment being debated? I don't see Therefore, I call Mr. Hadjukovic to support his oral amendments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So we are just adding for linguistic clarity that according to the available information at our disposal, and I did elaborate on the problems with the data that we can corroborate, no misuses or incidences were recorded, but according to the available information that we have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapporteur. Does anybody wish to speak against the oral supplement number 1? Don't see. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment, Madam Apadarai?
In favor.
In favor, thank you very much. I now shall put oral supplement number 1 to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Can we see the results to be displayed? The amendment is, this oral supplement number 1 is carried. I also have been informed that Mr. Pierre-Alain Frides wishes to propose an oral supplement 2 to Amendment 24. In amendment, it reads as follows: in Amendment 24, replace the words "the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees" with the following words: United Nations agencies. In my opinion, the oral supplement number 2 is in order under our rules. However, do 10 or more members object to the oral supplement being debated? I do not see. Therefore, I call Mr. Frides to support his oral supplement number 2.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, c'est purement factuel. Effectivement, il y a une visite qui a été réalisée début octobre et en fait, il y avait plusieurs agences des Nations Unies qui étaient présentes, d'où l'idée de mettre en fait en conformité avec la réalité.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Frides. Does anybody wish to speak against the oral supplement number 2? I do not see any. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment, Madam Apadarai?
Not against.
Against?
No. Not against. Okay, yeah, we can leave it like that.
Okay, that is clear language for in favor. We have had that. I will now put oral supplement number 2 to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The amendment is adopted. We now will consider the main amendment as sub-amended. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment as sub-amended? Mr. Rubinian.
Dear colleagues, again, I think this amendment is disrespectful towards the ethnically cleansed Armenians, because the amendment says that the UN representatives, when they went to Nagorno-Karabakh, didn't record incidences of mistreatment by Azerbaijani authorities of Armenians living for Armenia. Dear colleagues, the Armenians had already left. What they saw there were dogs and cats. This is ridiculous, I'm sorry. I'm strongly against this amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubinian. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment? Mr. Rousopoulos? The committee is in favor. I now shall put Amendment 24 as sub-amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The amendment as amended is adopted. The committee says that the amendment is rejected. I will now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. Did I forget something? The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The amendment is rejected. We now have to go back because I made a mistake. We go back to amendment number 9. I call Mr. Rubinian to support amendment number 9. Sorry for the mistake that I made. You have 30 seconds, Ruben.
Thank you. The amendment refers to the Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court. Again, I think this is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone who wish to speak against the amendment? Madam, you have the floor.
We are against because Azerbaijan is not member to the Rome Statute and therefore it's not appropriate to put reference to the International Criminal Court.
Thank you very much, Madam. What is the opinion of the committee? Mr. Rousopoulos?
The committee is in favor, Mr. President.
The committee is in favor. I now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The amendment is adopted. We dealt with this amendment. Now we go to page 70. Our staff is enormous. I now call Mr. Rubinian to support amendment number 13. You have 30 seconds, Ruben.
Thank you. The purpose of the amendment is to specify which cultural heritage we want to protect, and it's the Armenian cultural heritage because obviously it's the Armenian cultural heritage that is endangered in Nagorno-Karabakh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubinian. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? Someone, who, where? Mr. Husseinov.
We are against. The region has rich cultural diversities and they are part of Azerbaijan's cultural heritage. Azerbaijan is committed to the protection of all cultural heritage in its territory, regardless of its origin. Therefore, we do not see the need to single it out.
Thank you very much. What is the opinion of the committee, Mr. Rousopoulos?
The committee is in favor, Mr. President.
The committee is in favor. I now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Can we see the results to be displayed, please? The amendment is carried. I now call Mr. Rousopoulos to support amendment number 17. You have 30 seconds, Theodoros. Madam, does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are against because this goes beyond the scope of the report and its initial intention expressed in paragraph 21, which uses the text that the Assembly stands ready or should Azerbaijan fail. But in this case, it's made in unconditional. Besides, each session starts with a call from the chairperson whether there are any challenges to the credentials. So you can do that in January 2024 if you wish so, but let us not put the whole Assembly under the moral obligation to do so in this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What is the opinion of the committee, Mr. Rousopoulos?
The committee is in favor, Mr. President.
I now shall put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The amendment is carried. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15840 as amended. A simple majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Can we see the results to be displayed? The draft resolution is adopted. We will now consider the draft recommendation, which you find in document 15840, to which 9 amendments have been tabled. I understand that the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons wishes to propose to the Assembly that the amendments 32, 33, 34, 35 and 31 to the draft recommendation, which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared as rejected. Is that so, Mr. Rousopoulos?
Exactly, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Is there any objection against this proposal? I do not see any. As nobody objects, amendments 32, 33, 34, 35, 31 to the draft recommendation are rejected. I now call Mr. Frank Schwabe to support amendment number 15. You have 30 seconds. Mr. Schwabe.
Dear President, as I said before in my speech, we are in a situation where we have to use all our instruments in this organization towards the situation in our concerned country, Azerbaijan. One of these instruments has the Committee of Ministers, and this is a kind of special country monitoring for Azerbaijan under the 1994 Declaration on compliance with commitments. And I really think we are up to use it now, so I ask you to support this amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwabe. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Sadov.
Actually, Assembly, of course, can decide the opinion, but I think if we are talking about the real objective and balanced approach, this is not productive. And unfortunately, with this amendment, that would be very difficult to take into account the result of our Assembly work, the result of the work which Rapporteur already done. And that's why, of course, we're completely against all of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sadov. What's the opinion of the committee, Mr. Rousopoulos?
The committee is in favor of this amendment, Mr. President.
I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for results to be displayed. And the amendment is carried. I now call Mr. Julian Boulay to support Amendment 16. You have 30 seconds, Julian.
Thank you so much, dear President, dear all. Council of Europe is not a club of perfect countries, but of countries that want to do better. And in the light of this opportunity of becoming better citizens in better countries with better decisions for every one of us, I propose this amendment as to consider this procedure that hopefully would be a necessary signal in order to do things better at home in Azerbaijan, and not only. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boulay. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are against this amendment because it runs counter to the paragraph, to the logic and initial intention of the paragraph 21 of the resolution, which already contains the possibility of having recourse to joint complementary procedure, but it makes it conditional upon failure of Azerbaijan to fulfill its obligation. Whereas this amendment provides that this should be unconditional. This is simply logically wrong. We are against. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What is the opinion of the committee? Mr. Rousopoulos?
The committee is in favor of this amendment.
I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. Can we see the results to be displayed? The amendment is adopted. I now call Mr. Ruben Rubinian to support amendment number 4. You have 30 seconds, Ruben.
Thank you. The amendment suggests to replace the original wording with the words Armenian refugees, because these people are refugees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubinian. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? Sir, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are against for the very simple reason, and the reason is legal. All Karabakh Armenians hold Armenian passports. They are nationals of Armenia, and they cannot be regarded as refugees because no one can be a refuge on the territory of the nationality of the state. So that is why the initial text should remain. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What is the opinion of the committee?
The committee is in favor of this amendment, Mr. President.
I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I ask for the results to be displayed. The amendment is adopted. I understand that Mr. Rubinian wishes to withdraw amendment number 3. Does anybody else wishes to move it? I do not see any, so amendment number 3 is withdrawn. We now will proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 15840 as amended. A 2/3 majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. The recommendation as amended is adopted with a 2/3 majority. That's it.